Hello, everybody, and welcome to our December Improving Lives Through Art event, the final event of the MSAA Fall 2022 Improving Lives Through Art series. My name is Joe Caliva, and I will once again be your host this evening. And I can't wait to share more stories with you about artists who improved their lives and the lives of others through art, despite some considerable challenges. And tonight is a continuation of our special European virtual tours in celebration of the 2-year anniversary of MSAA's very first virtual art night, which gave birth to this Improving Lives Through Art series. And tonight, we are going to Paris, France. And we will visit some of the most interesting and beautiful places in the City of Light by following in the footsteps of 2 historic artists who you might have heard of before, Pierre August-Renoir and Vincent van Gogh, both of whom have inspiring stories of coping with illness or other challenges and through their art. Now, I'm back in the United States tonight, but just a few weeks ago, in November, I had the privilege of visiting the places I'll share with you tonight. So thank you for joining me for this very special anniversary tour. And I'd like to invite all of you joining live tonight on Zoom to stick around after the presentation, because I would love to once again give all of you a chance to unmute your microphones and cameras and join in a roundtable type of discussion. And I will once again be hosting a little game of trivia for some fun and to see how well you were paying attention. And of course, there will be a prize for our trivia winner, once again, a free pass to the March virtual tour. So be sure to take some notes while you're watching tonight. But before we begin, as always, I'd like to introduce the president and CEO of MSAA, Ms. Gina Murdoch, for a few special words to help us get the night started. Gina?
Bonjour, and thank you for joining us for the last in our fall series of our Improving Lives Through Art program, Tour de France Impressions of Wellness. We so appreciate the continued and amazing support for this MSAA's new program in Improving Lives Through Art. I'd also like to thank Joe Caliva, our docent, art enthusiast, and host for this evening. I am so excited to learn more about these artists right along with you. Please know that MSAA could not continue to provide programs and services for the MS community without your continued and incredibly generous support. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank our diamond sponsor, Publicis, and our gold sponsors, Sandoz and Pharma, for their incredible partnership. So I am ready to go. Back to you, Joe. Au revoir.
Merci beaucoup, Gina. It was great to see you. And before we get started, I would like to remind all of you about the upcoming Improving Lives Through Art events that you surely do not want to miss. So mark your calendars now for the spring Improving Lives Through Art series, taking place between February and April 2023, with 2 more paint-along events on February 7th and March 28th, and 2 more virtual tours on March 14th and April 1st. And MSAA is offering a gift option for this series. With the holidays coming up, if you would like to give all 4 sessions in the spring series to someone special for the holidays, all events start at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can go to support.mymsaa.org/ILTA spring for more information, or you could click on the link that Madison just put in the chat. And I'd also like to echo Gina's gratitude to our wonderful sponsors, as always, Publicis Health, our diamond sponsor, and our gold sponsors, Sandoz and Pharma, for not only making tonight's event possible, but the entire Improving Lives Through Art series as well. Thank you to Publicis Health, Sandoz, and Pharma for your support of MSAA. One last thing. I would like to remind all of you who are joining us live tonight on Zoom to use the chat box function to jot down any questions or comments you have during the presentation. As I mentioned earlier, we'll have a roundtable discussion at the end of the program, but the chat box is a good way of writing your question down as you think of it so you don't forget it later. And go ahead right now in the chat box if you haven't done so already. I know Madison was asking you to do this already, but write down where you are tuning in from tonight. As always, we'll try to give you a shout out a little bit later. And for our trivia game tonight, just as we did back in October, it will be best to have a second device nearby. So, for example, if you're watching this on your computer, have your smartphone or an iPad or a tablet nearby. Or if you're watching this on your phone or a tablet, have another phone or tablet or computer nearby. If you don't have a second device, you can still participate, but there might be a little bit of switching back and forth between Zoom, where I'll be sharing my screen, and your web browser where you have to answer the questions. So, all right, I think we are ready to start. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let's get ready to head to Europe. So first, as always, we'll pack our virtual bags and head across the Atlantic to the beautiful country of France. And as I mentioned earlier, even though there are many cities in France we could talk about that are important in art history, tonight we're going to focus on just one city, France's capital city of Paris. Paris is known as the City of Light. Thomas Jefferson once said, "A walk about Paris will provide lessons in history, beauty, and in the point of life." And he wasn't wrong. It is one of the most famous cities in the world and one of the world's major centers of finance, fashion, food, wine, and of course, art. It is the second most visited city in the world, due in large part to its famous cafe culture and being home to some of the most iconic and famous monuments and attractions in the world, like the Eiffel Tower. Probably the most recognizable monument in history, built for the 1889 World's Fair in Paris. Or the Arc de Triomphe, built between 1806 and 1836 to honor those who fought and died for France in the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars, and it also houses the tomb of France's unknown soldier. The Pantheon, built between 1758 and 1790, which was originally commissioned by King Louis XV himself to be a church dedicated to Saint Genevieve, Paris's patron saint. But after the French Revolution, it was decided in 1791 to be transformed into a mausoleum for the remains of distinguished French citizens. And of course, the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which means Our Lady in French. The medieval Catholic Church, which is considered one of the finest examples of French Gothic architecture. Still under construction from a fire in 2019, which destroyed most of the wooden roof, the cathedral was built between 1163 and 1260, taking nearly 100 years to complete, and it's now over 750 years old. Paris's reputation in the art world is due mostly because it is the home of the largest art museum in the world, the Louvre, which contains a whopping 380,000 objects with more than 35,000 works of art on display. The Louvre is also the home of some of the most famous and recognizable works of art in history, and of course the most famous painting of all time, the Mona Lisa, by Leonardo da Vinci. The Louvre is the most visited museum in the world, and the Mona Lisa, as you can see here, is its most popular attraction. The Louvre covers an astonishing area of 652,300 square feet. That's about 15 acres. Besides the Louvre, there are about 135 other museums in Paris, and it would be impossible to try and visit all of them in one tour. So tonight, since both of our artists are considered Impressionist or Post-Impressionist painters, we're going to concentrate on that smaller museum right across the Seine River from the Louvre, which has the largest collection of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism masterpieces in the world, the Musée d'Orsay. Built between 1898 and 1900, the Musée d'Orsay was originally the Gare d'Orsay, or the Orsay train station. But by 1939, the station's short platforms had become unusable for the longer trains that had come to be used for mainline services, so it was used mostly for suburban short hauls. In the 1970s, the building was almost demolished to make way for a hotel, but it was listed as a historic monument in 1978. Around the same time, suggestions were made to turn the space into a museum, and in December 1986, the Musée d'Orsay officially opened, and it is now considered one of the largest art museums in Europe. Compared to the Louvre's 380,000 objects and 35,000 works on display, the Musée d'Orsay has only about 6,000 works of art and only 3,000 on display. So, if your time is limited in Paris, this is the museum to visit. And it's where we'll spend most of our time tonight. But Paris wasn't always the center of the art world. That title belonged to cities like Rome, Florence, and Venice, Italy, from the 15th to the 17th centuries. But due to its museums and galleries, and the French monarchy commissioning many Italian artists to adorn their palaces, Paris's reputation as an artistic hub grew. And after the French Revolution ended in 1799, the city's bohemian culture and anti-bourgeois attitudes attracted artists from all over Europe and all over the world. The social freedom they found in Paris allowed them to express themselves like nowhere else in the world. And artists who were hungry for something new and groundbreaking set the stage for some of the most important periods in art history. One of those artists is our first featured artist tonight, Pierre August-Renoir, considered to be one of the leading painters or pioneers in the development of the Impressionism style. He was born in 1841 in a small city in southwest central France called Limoges. But when Renoir was just 3 years old, his father, who was a tailor, moved the family 240 miles north to Paris in order to find more work. They found a place to live very close to the Louvre, where Renoir spent many hours as a child and as a young man, walking around the many galleries and finding inspiration for his own budding artistic talent, which mostly focused on drawing. When he was just 13 years old, Renoir became an apprentice at a porcelain painter at the Lévi Frère porcelain factory in Paris. While there, he received his first exposure to painting, learning to copy designs to decorate fine china, vases, and other products. Before long, Renoir started doing other types of decorative painting to make a living. And he would use the copying skills he learned at the porcelain factory to copy works of art at the Louvre as well, teaching himself the techniques used by so many of the masters who came before him. The Louvre is located right across the Seine River from one of the most famous art schools in history, the École des Beaux-Arts de Paris, or the Paris School of Fine Arts. In 1862, at the age of 21, Renoir enrolled in classes here in anatomy and drawing. You can see the École des Beaux-Arts, or Academy of Fine Arts, here on the left bank of the Seine River. At the same time, he began studying in a private studio with an academic artist by the name of Charles Gleyre. It was while working with Gleyre that Renoir met several other artists around the same age as him who all shared similar ideas for the direction they thought art and painting should take. Those artists included Alfred Sisley, Frederic Bazille, and Claude Monet. They discovered that they all shared an interest in painting landscapes and contemporary life rather than historical or mythological scenes, which had been the standard in Paris and its galleries for many centuries. They began meeting and going out to the countryside together to paint in the open air, or as artists still call it today, in plein air. But they weren't just making sketches to be brought back and finished in the studio, as was the usual practice. They started and finished the painting completely out in the field. They believed that by painting in sunlight directly from nature and by making strong use of the vivid synthetic pigments that were becoming more and more available, they could more accurately represent the vibrant colors found in nature. They began to develop a lighter and brighter method of painting and redefine the meaning of realism in art, not by focusing on the drawing or precise brushstrokes or small details to create a perfect likeness, but by accurately representing the effects of light on color. They sought to capture the essence of a subject rather than its finer details, to give the viewer an impression of a scene rather than an exact replication. And so, this was how Impressionism was born. The four artists frequently met here at the Café de la Nouvelle Athènes, or the New Athens Café, for lively discussions about art. And the meetings became very popular among other artists who also wanted to be part of this innovative group, like Edgar Degas, Paul Cézanne, and Mary Cassatt. The cafe sadly no longer exists, and the site is now home to an organic supermarket, but it is still worth visiting this place in the area known as Pigalle in Paris to see where so many great artists once gathered, and the ideas that changed art forever were first shared. In April 1874, Renoir and his group of like-minded artists, who now called themselves the Cooperative and Anonymous Association of Painters, Sculptors, and Engravers, organized the first official Impressionist exhibit. There would be a total of 8 Impressionist exhibitions between 1874 and 1886, but it was at the third Impressionist exhibit in 1877 when Renoir revealed a painting that would go on to become one of Impressionism's most celebrated works. The Dance at Le Moulin de la Galette, a painting which helped catapult Renoir to fame in the Paris art world at the time, and cemented his place in history as one of the fathers of Impressionism. Besides exploring the effects of light on color and accurately representing color in nature, another goal of Impressionism was to focus on normal, everyday life, instead of mythological scenes, biblical stories, or other subjects that were larger than life. In this painting, Renoir creates a masterpiece from a typical Sunday afternoon at a dance hall in Paris called the Moulin de la Galette, located in the fashionable artistic district of Paris, known as Montmartre. Montmartre is located in the northern part of Paris in the 18th arrondissement. If you start at the Eiffel Tower, you could walk there in about 90 minutes by heading east, past the Musée d'Orsay, across the Seine River and past the Louvre, Then keep heading north until you reach the famous Boulevard de Clichy, and you'll arrive in Montmartre, the district known as the Bohemian capital of the world at the time, and where every notable artist from this time, from Renoir to Van Gogh to Picasso, settled to create. At the peak of the hill on which Montmartre is located is the beautiful Basilica of Sacré-Cœur de Montmartre, built between 1875 and 1914, and overlooking the entire city of Paris. But Montmartre is also known for something else. Its nightlife. And perhaps the most historic night spot in all of Paris is the famous Moulin Rouge, the birthplace of the dance we now know as the can-can. And Le Chat Noir, also found in Montmartre, which was the first modern cabaret that allowed patrons to sit at tables and drink while watching the live entertainment. On every street in Montmartre, you can find many cafes. But one of the most famous cafes in all of Paris is found right here in Montmartre, the Café des Deux Moulins, which was a location used to film many scenes for the popular French movie Amélie. You'll always find many fans here taking selfies around the counter where Amélie worked. And just a short walk away from the cafes on this picturesque little street called the Rue Courtois, in what is now preserved as the Musée de Montmartre, Renoir rented a studio in this modest little cottage where he painted several of his most well-known works while overlooking this beautiful, inspiring garden. But just around the corner from the studio, you can find and still eat at Le Moulin de la Galette, the location where Renoir painted Dance at Le Moulin de la Galette. But it was during his stay at this studio in Montmartre where Renoir painted another of his most well-known masterpieces, La Balançoire, or The Swing. Renoir actually rented the studio on Rue Courtois in order to be close to Le Moulin de la Galette while he worked on that painting, because there were so many figures in it and it took so long. But he found inspiration in the gardens there to paint a few other works as well, like this one. It's yet another great example of the Impressionism style, executed outside with brilliant color and quick, energetic brushstrokes. And the subjects are simply everyday people enjoying a lazy day in the garden. And if you visit the Musée de Montmartre while you're staying in Paris, you can actually recreate the painting yourself by forcing your loved ones to hop up on a replica of the swing at the location in the garden where Renoir painted this masterpiece. Now, if we head back to the Musée d'Orsay, we'll skip the long line and we'll head up to the 5th floor where you can see both of these Montmartre masterpieces. La Balançoire, measuring 3 feet tall and about 2 feet wide, and in the same gallery, not far away, the much larger Dance at Le Moulin de la Galette, measuring about 4.5 feet tall and 5.5 feet wide. You can see many famous Renoir masterpieces here at Musée d'Orsay, like these two, Dance in the City and Dance in the Country, both from 1883. But it was Renoir's skill as a portrait artist that attracted the attention of a broad range of patrons. And with numerous commissions underway, Renoir finally began to achieve some financial freedom. But from around the mid-1880s, inspired by visits to Italy, where he discovered the work of Raphael, Renoir broke with the Impressionist movement to apply a more disciplined, formal technique to portraits and figure paintings. From 1885 onwards, he reverted back to his earlier style, using thinly applied brushstrokes of pure color, and later brilliantly combining the classical painting techniques of Raphael with the impressionistic landscapes for which he was so well known, creating a perfect union between the traditional and the modern, the old and the new. But in 1892, Renoir developed a condition which made it impossible for him to paint. His joints started to swell in his hands and fingers, making it difficult to hold his brushes. 10 years later, by 1902, the swelling progressed so aggressively, it left his hands completely disfigured. Experts believe Renoir suffered from rheumatoid arthritis, a painful autoimmune disorder that primarily attacks the joints. In Renoir's case, it also immobilized his right shoulder and weakened his legs so much he needed to walk with 2 canes. Hoping that a warmer climate might improve his condition, in 1907, Renoir left Montmartre and moved to Cannes-sur-Mer in the south of France on the Mediterranean coast. But sadly, the move did little to improve his condition. In 1912, at the age of 71, Renoir suffered a stroke, which partially paralyzed his arms and legs, which had already been severely limited due to the rheumatism. For the rest of his life, Renoir was confined to a wheelchair. But despite the rheumatoid arthritis and the stroke limiting his mobility, he never let it limit his art. Not for one moment. Despite the paralysis in his arms and the deformity of his hands and the pain in his joints, according to his grandson, during this period of declining health, Renoir still produced more than 400 paintings. And remarkably, there is film to prove it. Shot sometime between 1915 and 1920, these rare films show Renoir at his home in Cannes-sur-Mer, sitting in his wheelchair, discussing his art with a friend or colleague, and still painting, despite barely being able to grasp the paintbrush in his afflicted hand. Using his mouth when needed to remove the brush, and using an assistant, usually one of his models, to help him grasp other materials. And if that isn't remarkable enough, during this time, Renoir also decided to take up sculpture. Once again, using an assistant to help maneuver the piece as he worked on it, possibly applying the techniques he learned at the porcelain factory where he worked as a teenager. In an article in the British Medical Journal from December 1997, in which author Jeremy Hugh Barron writes about how Renoir used art to cope with the effects of his illness, he states, "Painting was almost a physical need, and sometimes a cure, as if Renoir wanted to create on the canvas those things which he had to miss in real life because of his disability. Even when he woke at night crying in pain, he asked for some painting material and started to make small paintings on wood." Pierre August-Renoir died at his home in Cannes-sur-Mer on December 3rd, 1919. His legacy as one of the founders of Impressionism, one of the most important movements in art history, often overshadows his remarkable story of transcending pain and illness through art. But perhaps the quote that best sums up the impact art had on Renoir during the last 25 years of his life, when he dealt with so many challenges, was a response that Renoir himself gave to a young Henri Matisse when he asked Renoir why he still painted when it was obvious just how much it was causing him to suffer. Renoir answered, "The pain passes, but the beauty remains." Our second and featured artist tonight is probably one of the most well-known artists in history in regards to his health challenges. Vincent van Gogh. Sadly, the popular legends of his struggles with depression and of his mental breakdown often overshadowed just how talented this man was and how important his role was in the history of art. He only spent 2 years in Paris and 4 years total in France. But in that time, he managed to help change the course of art history forever. He wasn't born in France, but in the northern part of Western Europe, in the Netherlands, in 1853, in a small town known as Zundert, near the border of Belgium. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was a parson or minister in the Dutch Reformed Church. His mother, Anna Carbentus, came from a prosperous family in The Hague, Netherlands, and was a talented artist herself who passed her love of drawing on to Vincent at an early age. They all lived here at the local parsonage or church house, which the Dutch Reformed Church provided to members of the clergy. Vincent would attend the local church, which still stands today, every Sunday to watch his father preach. And he attended the local village school for at least 1 year in 1861 at the age of 8 years old. But afterward, unhappy with the education he was receiving, his parents withdrew him from the school and hired a private tutor, a governess named Anna Burney, who was also an artist. The 3 years she spent tutoring Vincent helped to further grow his interest and talent in art and drawing. But Vincent's childhood wasn't always a happy one. Seen here at the age of 18 or 19, Vincent was the oldest of 6 children, but he wasn't the firstborn child of Theodorus and Anna. Their first child, whom they also named Vincent, was stillborn. 1 year later, they gave their second-born child the same name. Growing up, the young Vincent would walk with his mother to the cemetery and repeatedly see his own name engraved on the tombstone of his dead brother. His mother seemed to be traumatized by the death of her first child, and she often spoke about how she lost him. To her, the real Vincent was a perfect angel in heaven, and no one could possibly compare to him. This had a profound effect on Vincent, and some experts and historians believe that his mother's early struggle with trauma and depression may have set the stage for Vincent's own mental illness years later. But Anna did encourage Vincent's love of drawing. And in 1864, when Vincent was 11 years old, she placed him to study at a boarding school in a town called Zevenbergen, about 15 miles from their home in Zundert. But Vincent felt abandoned, and he begged to come home. 2 years later, in 1866, at the age of 13, Vincent was sent even further from his home to another boarding school, this time to the city of Tilburg, about 27 miles from Zundert. The school was called the King William II Secondary School, and there Vincent studied drawing with an artist named Constant Cornelius Huysmans, who had been a successful artist in Paris. Huysmans' philosophy was to reject technique in favor of capturing the impression of things, particularly nature or common objects. These lessons seem to have impacted Vincent years later, but at the Tilburg school, he felt profoundly isolated, lonely, and depressed. In March 1868, he abruptly returned home. He later wrote, in a letter to his younger brother Theo, that his youth was austere, cold, and sterile. Then, 1 year later, in July 1869, at the age of 16, Vincent got an opportunity from yet another Vincent van Gogh, his father's brother, who Vincent called Uncle Cent. Vincent was given a position at the art dealers Gogh and Chi in The Hague, Netherlands. This was a happy and productive time for Vincent, and the exposure to the art world certainly helped to further his interest in his own art. And, inspired by what he was learning and seeing, he began to sketch and draw more earnestly. 4 years later, in 1873, Vincent's younger brother Theo also started working as an art dealer at Gogh and Chi in The Hague. But Vincent was transferred to Google's London branch. While there, he continued to draw, and one of his earliest known drawings is made during this period. A sketch of the house where he lived while working in London. But alone and without any family, he once again became depressed and felt completely isolated. To his uncle's disappointment, Vincent returned home to the Netherlands. Over the next 8 to 10 years, Vincent tried his hand at several jobs and moved around to various places. He became deeply religious and spent some time studying to become a Protestant missionary in southern Belgium, but failed the 3-month course there. He then tried going to school in Amsterdam to become a pastor, but failed the entrance exams. He returned to England to work as a supply teacher in a small boarding school in Ramsgate. He stayed for only a few months before leaving to become a Methodist minister's assistant. All of this constant moving around was taking its toll on Vincent's health, both physically and mentally. His father was especially frustrated and advised Vincent to commit himself to what he called a lunatic asylum. But his younger brother Theo suggested to Vincent that he focus and study harder on art. Until this time, Vincent had only worked on drawing using graphite pencil, and many of his sketches were copies of works from other artists, like one of his favorites, Jean-Francois Millet. But in 1880, at 27 years of age, he traveled to Belgium to follow Theo's recommendation and began formal studies at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Brussels to become an artist. And by 1881, some of the earliest known works by Vincent begin to emerge. He stayed in Belgium for only 1 year, but even after returning home to the Netherlands, he continued to work earnestly on his drawing, slowly making his way to charcoal, then to pastels, then watercolor, and finally oil painting. Between 1881 and 1885, Vincent produced a large number of works based on what were called peasant workers. Farmers, weavers, fishermen. He had a particular attachment and sympathy for peasants and other working class people. He also created many still life paintings during this period, between 1883 and 1886. And though these character studies and still lifes were an important part of his artistic development, they show very few signs of the vivid color that distinguished his later work. During this time, Theo continued to work as an art dealer for Gogh and Chi and became one of their most valued dealers. And in 1881, he was transferred to their main branch in Paris at 19 Boulevard Montmartre. He and Vincent maintain regular correspondence through letters, and Theo continues to support his older brother, both emotionally and financially, sending him money, painting supplies, and even renting a studio for him in the Netherlands. In 1885, Theo tells an art dealer in Paris about Vincent's work, and the dealer is interested in seeing more. Theo writes to Vincent asking him if he has paintings ready to exhibit. Vincent responds with some of his peasant character studies and what is now considered to be his first major work, The Potato Eaters. But unfortunately, the works didn't sell. And when Vincent complained to Theo that he wasn't making enough effort to sell his paintings in Paris, Theo responded that they were too dark and not up to date with the new, bright style of Impressionism. Though Impressionism was officially 11 years old by this time, Vincent had heard nothing about it. Theo knew that if Vincent was going to have any chance at success in the Paris art world, he needed to move to France and study there. Theo was also worried about Vincent's deteriorating health. By this time, Vincent's depression had led to severe mood swings and outbursts, poor diet, heavy drinking and smoking. So in March 1886, at Theo's invitation, Vincent packed up and moved to Paris. He first moved in with Theo on this street, just south of Montmartre, in a small apartment in this building at 25 Rue Laval, now called Rue Victor Maze, which later became the gallery of the groundbreaking woman art dealer, Berthe Weil, who helped the careers of artists like Picasso, Matisse, Modigliani, and Suzanne Valadon. After a few months, Theo found a new apartment in Montmartre that would provide more room for him and Vincent. It's not open to the public, but you can still walk in Vincent's footsteps past this apartment building at 54 Rue Lepitz. The apartment where they lived was located on the third floor. While living in Montmartre, Vincent studied at the famous Fernand Corman studio, located in Montmartre on the Boulevard de Clichy, just down the street from the Moulin Rouge. It's believed by some that Vincent is the man kneeling next to Fernand Corman, the proprietor of the school, watching him intently as he instructs the class. While at the school, he met artists like the Australian painter John Peter Russell, who painted Vincent's portrait in 1886. And also used Vincent for this series of head studies. At Corman's studio, Vincent also met Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, who also painted a portrait of him, but in pastel in 1887. Toulouse-Lautrec's post-impressionistic broad brushstrokes and bright, vibrant colors had a huge impact on Van Gogh's later work. Around the same time, he also became familiar with the work of Georges Seurat and Paul Signac, two neo-impressionist artists that pioneered a new technique known as pointillism or divisionism, where colors are separated and applied in small dots, forcing the viewer to blend the colors together in their own mind's eye and allowing them to see a much broader range of vibrant colors. And Vincent surely must have seen Seurat's most famous pointillism work, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte, which was painted just down the street from the Corman studio and the Moulin Rouge, in this corner building on the Boulevard de Clichy, which was where Seurat's studio was located. But Paul Signac painted with much larger dots, which made them visible from even further away and added more texture and energy to his paintings, as you can see here in this Signac painting located at the Musée d'Orsay. Vincent was fascinated with this technique, and he and Paul Signac actually became friends and would often paint together outdoors in a beautiful little village just outside of Paris called Asnières, about 5 miles from Montmartre, seen here in these paintings by Signac. Vincent also met artists like Émile Bernard and Paul Gauguin, two painters associated with an art movement called Cloisonnism, or synthetism, where artists painted with bold and flat forms separated by dark contours. This type of painting was inspired by the work of Paul Cézanne, who also painted in these bold, flat colors, separated by dark outlines. Vincent was also a huge admirer of Cézanne's work. Vincent can be seen here with Émile Bernard in Agnières, where he would also paint with Paul Signac. Vincent is the one with his back to the camera. All of these new friends and influences had a big effect on Vincent's work. And after being exposed to Impressionism, Pointillism, Neo-Impressionism, and all the other new styles to which his friends in Montmartre introduced him, a new Vincent began to emerge. The brushstrokes are looser and freer, like in the work of Toulouse-Lautrec. There are energetic, large dots applied all around his canvas, like in the work of Paul Signac. His colors are bolder and much more vibrant. And his colors are much flatter and more complementary and contrasting, like in the work of Gauguin and Cézanne. And while in Paris, Vincent also met an art dealer named Julien Tanguy, known by all the local artists as Père Tanguy, or Father Tanguy. He ran a small paint and art supply store in this small building, close to Montmartre, and was one of the first buyers of Impressionist paintings. He often displayed in his paint shop the works of the young, struggling artists like Monet, Renoir, Gauguin, Toulouse-Lautrec, Cézanne, and of course Vincent as well. But Tanguy had a significant impact on Vincent's painting style as well, especially after introducing him to Japanese art, specifically Japanese woodcut prints, like this one by Japanese artist Katsushika Hakusai, or this print by Utagawa Kunisada. The influence of Japanese art is clear in Vincent's later work from his time in Paris. Tanguy even helped and inspire Vincent to produce several works where he copied the work of Japanese artists, like in this painting, copied after the work of an artist named Kasai Eisen. And in a later portrait Vincent made of Père Tanguy, he even includes the Japanese woodcut prints behind his great mentor and friend. Vincent would also frequently walk around Montmartre and paint some of the famous windmills there. Some of these windmills are still standing today, and you can see them as you walk around Montmartre, the very same ones Vincent painted. One of the most famous windmills is this one, the Moulin de la Galette, which Vincent painted several times. And if the name sounds familiar, it's because it's the same Moulin de la Galette that we talked about a little earlier, located in Montmartre. Seen here in a painting by Vincent, but which was also used as the location by Renoir for his famous painting Dance at the Moulin de la Galette 10 years earlier. But despite his time in Paris and Montmartre being such a pivotal time for Vincent creatively, and an incredibly productive time, having produced more than 200 paintings in the 2 short years that he was there, he was still struggling emotionally. He was drinking and smoking heavily, due in large part to the plethora of nightclubs and brothels in Montmartre. He had developed a condition called smoker's cough, and he was finding it increasingly more difficult to find inspiration in and around Paris, with all of its distractions and with it becoming more and more industrialized and crowded. So, in February 1888, Vincent left Montmartre and headed to the south of France, where he settled in the city of Arles in the Provence region. The 2 years Vincent spent in Arles was his most prolific, with more than 200 oil paintings and another 100 drawings and watercolors. Inspired by the local countryside and the beautiful light, which also seemed to remind Vincent of his Dutch upbringing, his works from this period are rich in mauve, ultramarine blue, and his favorite color, yellow. He would paint his most famous masterpieces during this period, including the painting of his bedroom in Arles, which he actually painted several times, the night cafe terrace at night, Starry Night over the Rhone, and his famous still life, Vase with 12 Sunflowers, all painted within a few months of each other and within the first few months of his arrival in Arles. Another plan Vincent had while in the south of France was to create an art colony where all the friends he made in Paris would come and they could all commune together, finding inspiration as he did, far from the city and immersed in nature and a slower way of life. In May 1888, just 3 months after arriving in Arles, he signed a lease for the eastern wing of what he called the Yellow House at 2 Place Lamartine. The rooms were unfurnished and had been uninhabited for months, but he soon sent word to Paris through his brother Theo to invite his friends to come and create with him in Arles. But only one person would accept the invitation: Paul Gauguin. Gauguin arrived in Arles in October 1888, and he and Vincent immediately began painting together. This is when Gauguin created his portrait of Vincent, titled The Painter of Sunflowers. They would paint in different locations together, comparing work with one another, like in these paintings from an ancient Roman cemetery outside of Arles called Alichamps. These 2 paintings were by Gauguin, and these 2 by Vincent. But despite a good beginning, the relationship between the 2 artists quickly began to deteriorate. Vincent admired Gauguin and wanted to be treated as his equal, but Gauguin was arrogant and domineering, which frustrated Vincent. They often argued about differences of opinion, especially when it came to creating art. The arguments increasingly made Vincent fear that Gauguin was going to desert him, and the situation, which Vincent himself described in a letter to Theo as one of excessive tension, was rapidly heading towards a crisis point. Accounts of what happened on the night of December 23rd, 1888 are unclear. But one of the most likely explanations is that after a lengthy or heated argument, Gauguin walked out of the Yellow House, apparently making Vincent feel that he was leaving for good. After a lifetime of battling mental illness, depression, and overwhelming feelings of loneliness and isolation, this event triggered a mental breakdown in Vincent. And though he later said he had no recollection of this event, he apparently severed his left ear with a razor, causing severe bleeding. He bandaged the wound himself, wrapped the ear in paper, and delivered the package to a woman at a brothel where he and Gauguin both frequented. Vincent was found unconscious the next morning by a policeman and taken to the hospital. There, he was treated by a young doctor named Felix Ray, whose portrait Vincent painted the following year. The ear was brought to the hospital, but Ray didn't attempt to reattach it because too much time had passed. The local police ordered that Vincent remain at the hospital to be monitored and receive the care he needed. While at the hospital, he was diagnosed with acute mania with generalized delirium. After 2 weeks there, Dr. Ray cleared him to return to the Yellow House. But he spent the following month between the hospital and home, suffering from hallucinations and delusions of being poisoned. In March, the police closed his house after a petition by 30 townspeople demanded he be taken away. Even the landlord of the Yellow House signed a petition calling Vincent the red-headed madman. A short time later, Vincent left Arles and voluntarily entered the St. Paul Asylum in a nearby town called Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. While in the asylum, Vincent was still allowed to paint. He had 2 cells, both with barred windows, one of which he used as a studio. The clinic didn't seem to do much to improve Vincent's health, but his art was the only thing that kept him going and gave him a sense of purpose. And remarkably, during his 1-year stay at the clinic, he produced some of his greatest masterpieces and one of the world's most famous works of art. The Starry Night. Painted during a period at the clinic when Vincent was actually suffering a severe relapse and was so depressed he could barely bring himself to write, he created a piece that has moved and inspired countless numbers of people. Vincent's inspiration for the painting came from a combination of the cypress trees he would see around the clinic during his walks, from the view outside his barred window, and the memories of his beloved Japanese prints, like the one from Katsushika Hokusai, almost taking the wave right out of Hokusai's ocean and putting it in his night sky. Vincent combined them all in a beautiful vision of a vibrant blue sky swirling around a group of warm, dancing stars and a beautiful moon blanketing its light over the serene village below, sheltered by the fortress of mountains behind it. The Starry Night is now found here at the Museum of Modern Art, or MoMA, in New York City. Many people think it was only there temporarily, but it is actually the permanent home for Vincent's most famous masterpiece. While Vincent was in the asylum, his brother Theo got married to a woman named Joanna Bonger, and the couple quickly gave birth to a baby boy. In May 1890, Vincent, who wanted to be closer to his family and his new nephew, left the clinic in Saint-Rémy and wanted to move back to Paris. When Vincent arrived in Paris, Theo knew he still needed treatment, so he recommended a doctor by the name of Paul Gachet, who lived and worked in a small town about 20 miles outside of Paris called August-Renoir. Gachet was also an amateur painter, so he and Vincent got along very well. One of the first paintings Vincent shared with Dr. Gachet was a self-portrait he made while still at the clinic in Saint-Rémy. It's the portrait seen here at the Musée d'Orsay. When Dr. Gachet first saw it, he commented that it was absolutely fanatical. It is now one of Vincent's most famous works, and is considered by many historians to be his final self-portrait. Vincent moved to Auvers-sur-Oise in May 1890 to be closer to Dr. Gachet, and he rented a small room in this little building called the Ravoux Inn, where he would eat dinner at this restaurant every night. His room was located right above the restaurant, and he only paid 1 franc per night for rent. If you're staying in Paris, it's only a 1-hour train ride to this picturesque little town, where you can visit and walk through the very same streets where Vincent did 130 years earlier. But when you do walk around these streets, you get the feeling that not much has changed since Vincent was here in this sleepy, quiet town. And if you visit the Revue Inn, you can even eat dinner in the same restaurant and sit at the same table where Vincent spent every night during his stay here. During the 2 months between May and July 1890, Vincent continued to work feverishly in August-Renoir, producing about 70 oil paintings, including several portraits of Dr. Gachet, one of which you can see here at the Musée d'Orsay. But most of the paintings he produced here seemed to be reminiscent of the small town where he grew up in the Netherlands. He would take walks every day and paint some of the local cottages, many with thatched roofs, like those in Zundert. He painted the local town hall, which is located right across the street from the Revue Inn, where he was staying, and which possibly reminded him of the parsonage house where his family lived in his youth. And probably most reminiscent of his childhood was the local church, where you can still go and stand in the place where Vincent painted this serene and colorful masterpiece. And as you can see here, many modern artists still visit the quiet site to find inspiration from Vincent's memory. But in July 1890, Van Gogh wrote to Theo that he had become absorbed and captivated by what he described as the vast fields of wheat under turbulent skies. He wrote that they represented his sadness and extreme loneliness, and that the canvases will tell you what I cannot say in words. Despite the creative surge he seemed to be having in August-Renoir, Vincent just couldn't overcome those feelings of loneliness, sadness, and isolation. On July 27th, 1890, Vincent didn't show up for dinner at the Revue Inn. Several hours later, another artist in a room on the same floor heard moaning coming from Vincent's room. When the owner of the inn came up the stairs and opened Vincent's door, he was lying in bed with a gunshot wound to his chest. Vincent told them that he had tried to commit suicide by shooting himself in the chest while he was out in the fields painting. But there were no witnesses. He was able to walk back to the Revue Inn, where he was cared for by 2 doctors, but without a surgeon present, the bullet couldn't be removed. The following morning, Theo rushed to be by his brother's side and found him in good spirits at first, but within hours Vincent's health began to fail, mostly because of the untreated infection resulting from the wound. Vincent died in the early hours of July 29th, 1890. According to his brother Theo, Vincent's last words were, "The sadness will last forever." If you walk a short distance from the Église Notre-Dame d'Auvers, the church Vincent had painted, you'll find the quiet cemetery where Vincent is buried. But there is a second grave next to Vincent's. Theo had also been ill, and his health began to decline even more after his brother's death. Weak and unable to come to terms with Vincent's absence, Theo died on January 25th, 1891, just 6 months after Vincent. The 2 brothers and lifelong companions are now buried side by side. There are many debates over Vincent's illness or illnesses. Many psychiatrists today and other medical experts that have studied his letters and the accounts of his behavior seem to think that it was most likely an episodic condition with periods of normal functioning, such as temporal lobe epilepsy, severe depression, or bipolar disorder. But whatever the diagnosis, all seemed to agree that his condition was likely made worse by malnutrition, overwork, insomnia, and alcohol. But in my opinion, Vincent's story is still a remarkable example of improving your life through art, or finding wellness through art. Vincent began suffering from mental illness from the time he was a young boy. Without the refuge of his art, without the direction and sense of purpose it gave him over the 37 years of his short life, how much sooner would his illness have taken its toll? How many lives that have been touched by his work, improved by his work, would have been less fulfilled or less inspired to keep moving on in their own struggles? And this seems to be the very thing Vincent wanted to accomplish. In a letter to Theo, Vincent once wrote, "I want to touch people with my art. I want them to say he feels deeply, he feels tenderly." In another letter to Theo from 1880, he describes to his younger brother how his art keeps him going. And in the process, he provides advice to every artist or every person living with or facing what seems like an overwhelming challenge. "It was in these depths of misery that I felt my energy revive, and I said to myself, I shall get over it somehow. I shall set to work again with my pencil, which I had cast aside in my deep dejection, and I shall draw again. And from that moment, I have had the feeling that everything has changed for me." Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me this evening for this special anniversary, 2-year anniversary virtual tour of Paris. I hope you enjoyed it, and I am looking forward to possibly speaking with some of you if you feel comfortable unmuting your microphones and joining in. And of course, I will take a look at the chat in just a few moments to see if there were any comments posted or questions asked there. There does seem to be a good number of comments in the chat. By the way, I am joining you. I forgot to write in the chat. I'm joining you from Woodbury, New Jersey. I know we always have a lot of people from New Jersey here tonight. We, of course, have Madison from Mullica Hill, New Jersey, Jen from Haddon Township, New Jersey, Andrea from Collingswood, New Jersey, and Marilyn Torrey from New York City. Hello, Marilyn Torrey. Let's see. Anne from Northern Virginia. Thank you so much, Anne, for joining. Martha from San Diego. I recognize a lot of these names. I think these are all of our regulars here tonight. Janet from Atlanta. Hello. Gina from New Jersey. I know which Gina that is. Caroline from Southern California. All right, somebody on the West Coast. Therese from upstate New York. Hello, Therese. A regular at our paint-alongs as well. Anne and June Bishop from Atlanta. Hello, Anne and June. Wonderful comments in here too. Gina Murdoch commented about the 200 paintings. Yes, incredible. He was, I'm not sure if you were talking about when he was in Arles. He was in Arles for just under 2 years. And of course, during that time was when he was suffering the most. And it seemed to be the time when he created the most as well. So I agree, Gina, very remarkable. Let's see. Thank you for the comments, Barry Singer, and everybody. And thank you, Barry, for joining us tonight. Dr. Barry Singer, it's an honor to have you here. Let's see. I don't see any questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and invite you, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my spotlight off in case anybody wants to unmute their cameras and join us. But also, you might want to get your second device ready or get that nearby because we'll start our trivia game in just a moment. Somebody asked me, somebody from the MSAA staff, oh boy, putting me on the spot. What are your favorite pieces from both artists? Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. So I'll see. You know what? I'm going to see if I can pull it up here, and I'll share my screen. One of my favorite pieces by Van Gogh. It keeps changing, to be honest, but as some of you may know, I am a docent or a tour guide at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia, and we have 7 Van Goghs at the Barnes Foundation. And one of my favorite paintings, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen since this is a little bit more informal, and you'll see me poking around on the internet here in just a moment. But let's see. One of my favorite paintings by Van Gogh was this one, a portrait of a man who was a friend of Van Gogh's in Arles. He was a postman there, obviously. And I just have always loved the brushwork in this painting. You can see the painting style like Toulouse-Lautrec, like I mentioned in the tour. The wonderful Japanese woodcut print stylization in this piece. But another one of my new favorite, or my current favorite Van Gogh, I should say, if I can find it. Thatched roofs. Nope. Okay, I'm not gonna be able to find it. Well, let's just say that this one is one of my favorites, so you don't have to watch me poke around here. And when it comes to Renoir, there are so many paintings by Renoir. I think my current favorite, however, is the balançoire, the swing. If I can share that one again, because the young woman that you saw standing on the swing was actually my girlfriend, who very graciously got up on the swing and let me take this photo for all of you this evening. I'm paging back through many slides here to find it, but here we go. So I'll embarrass her again. Love the balançoire. I also love the dance at Le Moulin de la Galette, since I was able to walk by the actual location. So I think those are my 2 current favorite Renoir paintings. Madison has a poster of the Postman. That's great, Madison. Yes, it's one of the most popular paintings at the Barnes Foundation. Let's see. Dr. Singer asked that he heard Van Gogh was on digoxin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which affected his color vision. Oh, that's very interesting. I did not read that, shifting his color palette. The sort of accepted art history, I guess academia or writing, is that you saw a discernible shift in his use of color when he moved to Arles and Paris. Paris is usually explained by the influence of the other artists and, of course, them experimenting more with color and painting outdoors. But the south of France, as you saw tonight, both Renoir went there. Cézanne was from the south of France. He went to Paris for just a few months and decided he's going back to the south of France. Van Gogh, Picasso, almost every major artist, Matisse, all went to the south of France, and all of them said there's something about the light in the south of France. I was just, in my opinion, I thought it was something about the light in the south of France that caused such a shift in Van Gogh's style. Dr. Singer posting some links as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Singer, for doing that. Also, I want to make a very quick correction. I want to see if I can go back to this slide very quickly while I am making this announcement. I think there was a mistake on the date of the... Whoop. Okay. Well, my slides just crashed just in the nick of time. I'm glad it did it now. I originally mentioned that the April tour was going to be on April 1st. It's actually April the 11th. Thank you, Jen, for mentioning that to me and spotting that mistake. So, all right. Well, since I can't share my slides right now, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if you spend any amount of time on Zoom or in webinars or in corporate get-togethers, you're probably familiar with Kahoot. So our game tonight, our trivia game, is going to be played through Kahoot. I am going to, let's see, make this a little bit bigger for those of you that are comfortable with using a device to scan a QR code. For everyone else, I know there's a way I can click a link to share with all of you. Let's see. Copy link to share. There we go. Okay, here is here's the QR code again for those of you who are using that. I already see people popping in there. We have 10 questions tonight, and let's see. Here we go. Here's the link in the chat if people would rather do that. If you are not comfortable with going to kahoot.it and putting in the game pin or scanning this QR code, you can click the link I just posted in the chat. While people are signing on, I see a bunch of names popping in here. I'm going to read this comment by Georgianne. I have really enjoyed your art tours and knowledge. Thank you, Georgianne. Many of us know these artists, but the wonderful information you provide of their lives and all the history is something I treasure. I have been to the Musée d'Orsay, which is a must to visit. Again, thank you so very much. So happy you got to see the Musée d'Orsay. We were planning on maybe going to the Louvre while we were there, but those of you that have been there and have seen it know that just when you see it from the outside, it is just overwhelming. So we decided against it. But yes, the Musée d'Orsay is incredible. It's beautiful and has a wonderful history as well. All right, so it looks like we have a lot of people in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we have 7 people in the game here. So I'm going to go ahead and start. You'll see the questions. I think I made the settings this time where you'll actually see the answers on your device as well. Fingers crossed for that. And people are still joining. Here we go. Here's the QR code one more time. Keep your devices open or else you'll have to sign in once again. QR code, the link is in the chat. And let's see, we have 8 people. That's a good number. And let's see, we're going to start the game in 3, 2, 1. All right, get ready, folks. First question in the ILTA Paris Tour Trivia. Starting, okay, I already did the countdown, but we'll do it again. What was the name of the French town where Renoir was born? That was back in the first slide. August-Renoir, Montmartre, Limoges, or Saint-Rémy. On your device, just tap on the corresponding color or shape for the response of your choice or the correct answer. Time is up. Let's see. 5 people got it right. All right. Most of you got it right. Limoges. Not in the south of France, but a little further south, a couple hundred miles south of Paris. That was really testing your listening skills all the way back to the beginning. So, all right, let's see. By the way, I forgot to remind everyone that even if you answer the same answer as everyone else, there is a timing feature in Kahoot, so it gives more points to the person who answers the fastest. So appropriately enough, somebody named Art13 is in the lead. Congratulations, Art13. All right, second question. True or false? At the age of 13, Renoir began working in a porcelain factory. True or false? At the age of 13, Renoir began working in a porcelain factory. It is true. It looks like all but one answered correctly. We won't ask who that one person is, but congratulations to all of you. Let's see who answered the fastest, and if Art 13 retained the lead, he or she or they did. Congratulations, Art 13. But Ann B moved up and is vying for the lead. All right, congrats everybody. Here we go. Question number 3. Vincent was his parents' oldest child. How many siblings did he have? He was the oldest of how many children? Or I should say, how many siblings did he have? 5, 6, 3, or 1? Time's almost up. By the way, I should also remind everybody you have 20 seconds. All right. Answers were pretty varied here. He was the oldest of 6 children. He had 5 surviving siblings. I guess somebody could make a case that I was trying to trick you because of the one child that also bore the name Vincent that was stillborn. But we'll go with what I was saying. He was the oldest of 6 children. And let's see, Art 13, boy, there's a little fire icon now. Art 13 is on fire. Ann B is still in second place, moving closer and closer to that lead. So look out, Art 13. And I think Jen is moving up too. All right, here we go. Next question, number 4, true or false? The painting considered to be Vincent van Gogh's first major work is called The Potato Peelers. The painting considered to be Vincent van Gogh's first major work is called The Potato Peelers. 10 seconds. Boy, I thought everybody was going to answer this one quickly. People are still thinking. Here we go. Time's up. And it is false. It's actually called The Potato Eaters. Congratulations. No, wait, did I? Yes, this answer is false. It's the name of the painting is The Potato Eaters, not The Potato Peelers. So those of you who answered false got it correct. Let's see how it affected the scores. Okay, Art 13 still in the lead. Martha is on fire. She's moving closer now. It's taking the second place position from Ann B. Oh no, it's getting tense. I can actually feel my heart racing a little bit. This is exciting. All right, question 5. What Italian Renaissance artist inspired Renoir to break with the Impressionists and return to a more classical style? Michelangelo, Caravaggio, Leonardo da Vinci, or Raphael? What Italian Renaissance artist inspired Renoir to break with the Impressionists and return to a more classical style? All right, time's up, folks. It was Raphael. And in particular, Raphael's nude figures or figure paintings, which definitely had an effect on Renoir and the way he painted his later figure portraits. So let's check the scoreboard. Oh no! Art 13 and B moving into the lead. Wow, I can hear the yelling and screaming now. All right, Martha still hanging in there tightly at number 3. Jen, Madison in the 4th and 5th spots. All right, game can still go any direction. We're only on number 6. The original 4 artists who gave birth to Impressionism were Renoir, Alfred Sisley, Frederick Bazille, and who else? The original 4 artists who gave birth to Impressionism were Renoir, Sisley, Bazille, and who else? 5 seconds. We need that tension music. It was Claude Monet, correct. 4 people, or the majority of you got it correct. It was Claude Monet. Very good. Checking the scoreboard. All right, MB staying in the lead. Madison is on fire. I hope it's a good thing when we see that fire. Art 13 dropped to number 3. Oh no. Okay, there's still time to catch up. Here we go. Number 7. Julien Tanguy, who introduced Vincent to Japanese woodcut print art, was known by what nickname? Air Tanguy, Père Tanguy, Tantan, or Tanguy. What was Julien Tanguy's nickname known in Paris by the art community there? Yes, most of you got that one. Père Tanguy, which means father or Papa Tanguy. He was sort of a father figure to all of the struggling artists there. And checking the scoreboard once again. Wow, Anne B is widening the gap between first and second place. Art 13 back in second. Madison holding on to number 3. GRM and Martha taking the 4th and 5th spots. All right. Question number 8. What was the name of the doctor who first treated Vincent on the fateful night he severed his ear? What was the name of the doctor who first treated Vincent on the fateful night he severed his ear? Dr. Felix Ray, Dr. Paul Gachet, Dr. Bert Weil, or Dr. Julien Tanguy? Yes, most of you got it correct. Dr. Felix Ray. Dr. Paul Gachet was the doctor who he met and treated in the last couple months of his life in August-Renoir. Julien Tanguy was not a doctor, and Bert Weil was an art gallery owner, not a doctor. All right, let's check the scores. All right, Ann B holding on to number 1. Art 13 holding on to number 2. All right, just a couple questions left. Here we go. What way is it going to go? Here's number 9. Who was the only artist who accepted Vincent's invitation to go to Arles and stay at the Yellow House? Who was the only artist to accept Vincent's invitation to go to Arles and stay at the Yellow House? Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, Paul Gauguin, Georges Seurat, or Paul Signac? Wow. Okay. Yes. Looks like all of you were paying attention to that one. Paul Gauguin, of course. And, of course, the artist who's with the fateful argument led to that terrible night. And checking the scoreboard. All right. It's Anne and Art. It's going to be a photo finish, folks. I think between Anne and Art, unless a miracle happens here with the rest. But let's keep going. Number 10, last question here. True or false? Renoir had to give up sculpting after he was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. Renoir had to give up sculpting after he was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis because it affected his joints so badly. True or false? The timer keeps freezing. Okay. All but one. All right. Got this one correct. It was false. He actually started sculpting after he was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which was just amazing. So, all right. That was the final question. Let's take a look at the final standings. In the third spot is Madison. All right. Congrats, Madison. Number 2, Art 13. All right. And I can only guess who number 1 is. Is it Ann B? It's Ann B. Woo! Congratulations, Ann B. and Art 13 and Madison. Runners up. Oh, I missed it. It was Martha and somebody else. Way to go, Ann. Congratulations. And thank you all for playing tonight. I hope you had fun. I know we're just about at the 90-minute mark, and it's time to wrap things up. But if there are any other questions, you could post them quickly in the chat. I just want to go back and address the comment that Georgienne Ross put. She mentioned that she really enjoys these tours, and even though she's familiar with these artists and their work, hearing and learning about this different perspective, it's like learning about them all over again. It's the same for me, Georgienne. It's one of the reasons why I love preparing these virtual tours for MSAA. And I just want to take a moment and thank the entire MSAA and ILTA, Improving Lives Through Art team, Rebecca Mooney, Jen, Madison, Gina Murdoch, of course, for all of their work and for giving me this opportunity to explore this other part of these artists' lives and how it influenced and informed their work. So very grateful for that. And thank you once again, MSAA. Thank you again to our sponsors, Publicis Health, Pharma, and Sandoz, for always supporting MSAA, and in particular the ILTA series. Oh, and Tori wants to say goodnight. Of course. Tori, where are you? Am I still
right there? Hi.
Hey, Tori. How are you? Thank you so much. Is it past your bedtime? I hope we're not keeping up too late.
It's getting there, but you know what? She's always wanted to go to France, and we loved it. So thank you. That was so interesting. We didn't do as well on the quiz. She did better than me, but loved it.
Thanks. When you guys do go to Paris or France in person, you have to let me know. We'll all meet up there, and I'll take you to my favorite baguette and boulangeries or bakeries out there.
Well, that sounds great. Although first we'll come down to Philly to see you there. So
yes, yeah, come here first. Did I hear Tori just say crepes?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I managed. I wanted to put in. It's funny, when I was going through my photos when I came back, despite all the art and monuments and history there, most of my photos were of food. Crepes, baguettes, cheese, onion soup. Yes. I have to talk to MSAA. Maybe we can do a virtual food tasting or something. I don't know.
That would be good.
Well, you have to work on that.
Right.
Hey, I want to do a very quick shout out to the board members that were here tonight. Of course, we mentioned Dr. Barry Singer. Thank you again. And of course, Meryl, who we were just talking to, is a board member at MSAA. Thank you so much, Meryl, for being here.
Thank you, Jeff.
And of course, my pleasure. And Anne, and I guess it's the same Anne, and Martha and Andy. Thank you so much to the board members once again for being here tonight. And let's see, Therese said yes to the food tour, maybe a cooking class. Okay, we'll have to work on that. I did try to make my own baguettes after coming back here. I was so inspired by the baguettes out there that Magda and I had to try making our own. So yeah, we'll work on that. So once again, everybody, thank you so much for the wonderful comments and questions and joining me tonight. Thank you to MSAA for providing this wonderful virtual series, Improving Lives Through Art, and for all the ways that you improve lives for the MS community. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see all of you in the spring. Bye-bye.